Welcome back to the R6 Masterclass. Today I'm going to show you how to set up every single bomb site on Kafe. Now, bringing Oryx onto this site is actually very useful for opening up these bars using his dash ability. It will just bust open the side panels and means you don't have to waste a load of shotgun ammo. That way they don't drop skylight, hop over, and then plant bomb behind. And you can also use it on these smaller bars or mini bars to open them up, so if anyone tries to sit behind to plant a bomb, they're going to be quite exposed. Now, something interesting about these mini bars here is that they are actually a multi-layer surface, so you would have to hit through at least 3 layers to be able to see all the way through. That's why if you're ever fighting someone behind these and you're trying to wallbang them, it's not really going through as much, because you'd have to shoot the same point 3 times. That's 4, but it should serve the purpose for the bullet to go through. Now, what this means that people can do on these mini bars is that they can just open up a point like this, a few layers through, and then when they know, for example, you're on that door, they can just spray through it and light you up. When you try and spray back, you're only spraying back at a punch hole. And that's something kind of interesting about these bars, but that's pretty much why they get opened up. And this one and this long bar is the one that gets opened up. In terms of reinforcements, we want to reinforce this single wall and this single wall on the either side of the double door. We want a head height peak over here and a crouch height rotation. Now, this allows someone to play pretty much in this area on this pillar. Now, you can castle off this door. You can even castle off this door. You can run castle on the top floor. It can be quite useful for setups. But again, if you wanted to have this reinforced, you do have an extra reinforcement, and you can quite as easily have this wall reinforced as you can open. But it does make it a bit easier for them to just get in on this window and come over here and plant, as it is then quite a bunkered point on the site. Now, you don't actually need a rotation here. You could have head holes all the way across. I don't personally like it because it gives this window too much sight line into this area. But if you ever don't have a rotation here, you just shoot out the banisters, like so, and then you can just walk across. Oh, like so, you could just walk across, I believe. Yeah, you don't need to sprint. And that way you can rotate on the corners of these balconies. You can also get behind the bomb chassis here, which can be a decently good spot to sit, especially if you have bottom floor control or you have a roamer downstairs, or you know that the last few people are on the roof. As then you can either have a somewhat off angle if they do swing wide, which is very unlikely. They'll swing out and then come in to come and plant on this bar, and then you can just maneuver around the bomb, and then you can also see in between this if they're planting in the corner, or if you have the bar open like this, you can utilize this bomb for cover and then maneuver around and get to A to B, if that makes sense. Now, something that a lot of people just don't seem to remember to do is reinforce the 2 piano walls. This is very important, as holding piano is a key point that you need to hold. If they breach this, come in here and get free reign to this, they can take a lot of map control very quickly. They almost will indefinitely get cigar control at one point. You shouldn't be trying to hold this for the entire round. Hold it for 20-30 seconds, waste just a little bit of time, shoot some drones, then fall back, hold piano, and hold the default plant spot over here behind the bar. Now, opening this up makes anyone rappelling in this window very uncomfortable because they can't use this as visual cover as the bar is open. Again, Oryx's ability can smash this open, or you can shoot this open with a shotgun. This is personal preference. Azami typically will play in here with strats, with keeper barriers and creating one-ways. Now, if you don't reinforce the wall over there, you do have the rotation. Azami can reinforce this hatch if she is playing in here and she has some ADSs. And that's a nice option because it is a armored floor. That way she can't just be vertical played out of the position. Now, moving on to the washrooms or the bathroom. This is really annoying. It just sounds like a gas pipe leaking. Oh well. You want to have head holes across this wall, reinforce the 2 corner walls, and then reinforce these 2 walls as well. You want a vault rotation here. Now, playing frost on this site is actually really, really good. What you can do is put a frost mat on the other side of this rotation, so if they do try and hop in and take that immediate mid control, they're going to end up in a frost mat. Another good point Also, reinforce this wall and open a vault rotation on this, or you can have a full size standing rotation. But with the vault rotation, you elevate your player model, and it makes it harder for someone peeking the window to see your feet when you rotate. Now, another good place for a frost mat is on this staircase. You just place it like here, or even here, kind of in this area. Because when people are coming up these stairs, these zigzag stairs are a pain. You're looking all around here and you've already walked into a frost mat, or you walk out wide, or you walk close. You're going to end up tripping into that frost mat a lot of the time. A lot of the time I see people play frost on this map. They just put 2 frost mats either side of the skylight drop, and that's absolutely pointless. If I'm dropping skylight, I'm bouncing a nade off of this down to here. If it gets hit by an ADS, then I'm getting someone to throw some smokes, or I'm throwing a drone down to assess how many ADSs are actually defending this point. Then I'm throwing a nade down to clear any barb or any utility here, because it's very common for people to put barbed wire. Yeah, you could put down a spool of barbed wire here, that's fine. But I also recommend double barbing white and throwing barb on hatch drops like this, and you can do it on the red hatch drop for the red stairs. But again, it's just not really worth it because they are going to be able to deal with that very easily. This one may pose a bit more of an annoyance for them when they're coming in. They may actually need to destroy it, whereas they'll just drop into the red barb and break it by punching it out. But another good place for a frost mat, like I said, put one on the white stairs, one on that vault rotation, and then just put one here for the default plant. If someone runs in and goes like this to default plant, and especially if this bar doesn't get opened up, they'll end up in a frost mat and having to pull themselves out of it to then plant the bomb. Alright, moving on to kitchen. Now, we are going to discuss this area in a minute. The one thing that will always be constant is reinforce that hatch. Now, you want to place a reinforcement in the middle of this wall and run feet holes across this wall. You do want this wall reinforced. If Castle is available, do bring him here. This is one of the sites that he's actually quite strong on. Castle off this double door. And you can also castle off the coat check window. And you do want to castle off this singular door, reinforce this wall, and open a rotate here so people can swing and assist. Now, this is an open kitchen setup. Now, some people will play this as a closed kitchen setup, and if they do, that means that they'll close off this wall or this wall. It'll either be one of the head holes. This one also is a rotation as it's slightly higher in the middle. Now, we're just going to discuss this as an open setup, and then we'll go over just what a closed setup is. We also want to reinforce this wall and open the feet holes. The feet holes are very important. Do not ever forget to reinforce this wall. Now, we do want to play ADSs in this room. Otherwise, a lot of the time, we'll just get pushed out of this area very, very quickly with utility. Barbed wire over this area, making it more difficult for shields to push in without clearing it. Now, moving on. As castles only utilize 3 barricades, you could put one on this door or one on this window, depending on how you want to maneuver in the area. I prefer to have them both open. Now, we have the head holes to assist anyone playing in this area or playing on the rotation, swinging the window in this room, as this area is very important to lock down. If they get control of this early on, they have a lot of time to breach and just come in and plant in a lot of areas that are quite safe, especially with a shield. Now, if you are playing this closed off, you reinforce this wall and either keep this open and play the hallway, but if you don't have the castle, you don't want to play the hallway, then you would reinforce this and then just keep this open. This is dependent on whether you have castles to whether you want this door reinforced. Now, obviously, you can play out in this area without castle. It's just a little bit more difficult and interesting to play. In terms of this area, like I said, we'd get to it a little bit later on. This is now later on. You can play a Cade Claw here that would get both of these walls if they're reinforced in the hatch, but most likely people are monkey braining and banning Cade when it's really not that strong in this site. If you are going to close this wall, then you can close one of those 2 walls as well. Happy days, fun times. Or you can play a VIP extension, where you reinforce both of these walls, you throw some sort of electrification on it, or you just deny it just to force them to waste a bit of time, but it's really not that difficult because they can just come up to the door and shoot whatever off of the wall. Now, if Cade isn't banned, obviously there are ways to claw this to make it much more difficult to get, like on the back of the light box, and then there's ways to hide it in one of these boxes or shelf or this area. to potentially make it more difficult just to get this wall. By defending white stairs, you are really limiting their movement. Typically, people would play this maybe with a shield over here, and then they'll play in this area, and they'll also control this area. If you are, and you do have a spare castle, castling off this doorway, leaving this one open, or you can castle this doorway and then leave this one open. You can also have head holes opened up so you can support from this room as well, diagonally across into this space. Playing this extension is something that is reasonably hard to do. I've seen people try and do it solo. It is not a solo thing. To do this, yes, you need a deployable shield and one person to play the area, but you also need anti-utility like Jaeger or Wamai. And Wamai playing in this area, that can work out quite well because he can reinforce the positions that they seem to be pressuring the most. They say it's the white door. Cool, you can throw your magnets over there. They start coming in behind you, you can start throwing magnets out as you need them, and that's why Wamai playing in this area is a potential strong pick over a Jaeger. But obviously you do need the deployable shield, and this is not a common thing to run. Now, if that is the case, you can move this reinforcement to here if you're still keeping the site the same way, and just reinforce this wall, because they will come and put punch holes and look on the long angle. Alright, now we're moving on to reading and fireplace. Now, this site is the stronger one out of the two to defend, especially if you defend it like this. I see a lot of people making the mistake of reinforcing this wall. That's something you do not want to do. You're not going to be playing in this site. You can open up this hatch if you want to play close to the bomb for a little bit, get some peaks, some pixel peaks, and then drop down and run off, or you can leave the hatch closed and just not play in the site at all. Let me just replace this. If they repel in, this is a completely bad situation to be in. Now, you also want to have barbed wire in front of the fireplace. Now, it's still gettable from back here without being completely inside, but we also don't want them to be able to come out of fireplace really quickly, get into a corner to tuck up and plant. That's why we open up these feet holes and these head holes on the wall. So when you have someone playing on the white stairs, and we'll get to the top floor setup for this site as well, you can then look down into the site. You can also more open, so to speak, so you can see all the way through and into the back. And also then it's something that can be played coming up on the stairs. You can wall bang through, you can shoot through. There's many different options. Now you want to reinforce this wall and open up a rotation. It can be a crouch rotation. I just used Oryx's face to go through this, and I would prefer it to be a crouch rotation. And you do want this hatch open as well, so the people on the top floor can drop back and get back into sight and play and maneuver in this area. Now, you also want to reinforce these two walls and electrify or deny them in some sort of capacity. Mute here is actually pretty strong. Placing jammers down can be very important because they will try and drone and enter from this point and try to apply pressure. If you can open up feet holes on this wall, that's another benefit. And there's not much that you really need to do inside of this room. You can open up some holes in the walls to make them feel uncomfortable. But for the most part, the rest of the majority of the setup time will be utilized upstairs. Now, another thing that I forgot to mention when this was the upstairs site, you can remove these dressers and these chairs in these hallways by punching them in the corners to make it easier to maneuver and easier to see when you're peeking out. There isn't anything potentially in the way blocking, so you don't have to wide swing as much, and you can play more tucked up into this corner. Similar to the upstairs setup, we want to reinforce this wall, open head holes, open a vault rotation, reinforce both of these walls, and a vault rotation, and reinforce this wall. Because obviously we're limited by the amount of reinforcements that we have, we want to reinforce this wall so we have an anchor point. And if we can play castle this door, this double door, hell, you can even open some holes on this wall so you can play up on the bar if you want. And it is probably best to castle off one of these two doors, or both of them, this door potentially, and then castle off this door, so when someone's in this area, they're not getting shot across, and then they can play quite happily, swinging into the piano. So castling this door and the door into piano would be a good idea. Okay, now for fireplace and mining. Obviously, we want to have the hatch done. We do want someone playing in piano and holding it. Now, optionally, you can play the top floor for this site, but it is a very difficult thing to do. To play the site below, you do need quite a few reinforcements. You want to reinforce both of these walls, or at a minimum just this wall, and then open this one up. Now, if you are going to be reinforcing the two piano walls, you take this reinforcement and put it on the piano walls and play piano as long as possible. You do want to open up the lower portion of the wall, but not quite feet holes, more like kneecap holes, as this means that they will feel very uncomfortable, but it's enough to make them aware of what's going on. And you also want the holes to be a little bit higher, so that way if you're peeking from this side of the mining equipment, it's a little bit easier to see through. Now, you do want to have the ability to maneuver and peek off of these walls. You can either open up head holes, or you could just have a singular rotation into the corner, so you can rotate out and swing this area, and also peek off onto the soft wall. This side is another side that it's good to have head holes, but this debris is absolutely god-awful. So again, you could move that reinforcement to here, but it will give them a bunkered corner to plant in, which is what we do not want. We want the rotation to be through here, and we're going to leave this wall soft, as we again are very limited in reinforcements. We want to reinforce this wall, and this wall here. Open up the walls on the bottom half. Doesn't need to be super clean. This one can be a complete mess. That's fine. You do want barbed wire out here to make it harder pushing the door. Like I said, this is a pocket strat site. There is no situation where you really want to be defending this over the other one. But if you are in the off chance that you just want to try it because everything else has gone so horribly wrong to see how it goes, then this is worth giving a shot. You're going to want a Jaeger and a Wamai, most definitely, and maybe even a Rooney, something to really slow them down utility-wise. Playing a castle upstairs here can be somewhat functional, but not as functional as it is on other sites. Again, you can potentially attempt to slow them down by opening yourself up some rotations in this top floor and roaming around, because you are going to need a heavy roam presence to control this site, as again, it's going to be very easy for them to get a lot of control of this top floor area. Thank you for watching. As always, links are in the description if you would like to join the channel. See you in the next one. Bye bye.